To support this channel and continuing to provide quality and accessible music education programming, please consider donating to the links in the description or in the pinned comment. Thank you. The circumstances of how My Love Is Your Love came about are pretty fascinating. After I'm Your Baby Tonight, Whitney goes and does Bodyguard, followed by Exhale, then The Preacher's Wife, then Cinderella. It's been almost 10 years since we've gotten a regular album out of her.
8 years. Why you take 8 years? Well, I got a call from my dad of the industry. I call him. And he said, Whitney, it's time for you to come back to your job. I did this record in 6 weeks.
Really?
Yeah, I did 13 songs in 6 weeks.
The album was recorded in 6 weeks. So due to the quick turnaround, she can only record vocally what she's capable of. So the changes we heard during the transitional period are present on this record. For instance, the reduced use of head voice. Looking at this graphic, she goes from utilizing her head voice throughout an entire album to about a third of the album. And when she uses her head voice, you'll notice that that skip is still present when she tries to transition between the head and chest voice.
You are making a fool of me. Oh. Show up on your corner.
In the transition period, we discussed how her money note went from D flat in the center of the voice to around B. The ballads on the record, When You Believe and Until You Come Back to Me, are now arranged so that the big note is a B. In the transition period, it was mentioned that Whitney was beginning to talk through songs and rely heavily on run.
Friday night, you and your boys went out to eat.
The 3 hits from this album, My Love Is Your Love, Heartbreak Hotel, and It's Not Right, are primarily sung in a speech or conversation-like cadence.
Lose my fame and fortune. Really don't.
And she will add a run to embellish it.
And I'm homeless on the street. Lord, Lord.
My Love Is Your Love is considered one of her best albums and had critics saying, Whitney is back.
Now the record is great and you're getting rave reviews.
Thank
Feel
But
good?
Whitney wasn't doing anything different. So why was she being received so warmly again? This is the importance of style.
Of course, but I chose the young hot producers like Wyclef and Miss Missy Misdemeanor and Rodney Jerkins. I wanted to work with some of the newer generation of power. Right. So.
During this time period, she's working with producers like Missy Elliott, who is also producing for singers like Gina Thompson and SWV. And around this time, Missy's vocal production is very distinctive. The verses are sung in a speech or talking-like pattern, and then the singer will go off into a run.
It don't pay bills. There are more guys with more skills. Everything by a belt. Sending me crazy, crazy. I love the way you taste me. You're so tasty like peach dry.
All up on some chick as though I don't exist. What is this? Oh.
So Whitney's style of singing now matches the style of music. So it shouldn't have been a surprise that the album was a hit.
Specjalnie w Sopocie, po raz pierwszy w Polsce, Whitney Houston.
Oh, if you're really cheap, yes. Only 2 of you had dinner. I found your credit card receipt.
But like all of her albums in the past, she had to tour it. Before this tour began, she had just finished a European tour months prior and an Asian tour the year before. So what was the rush to get back on the road? Money. She had no money. How do you break sales, touring, and movie records and end up with no money? This girl is going to have nothing left by the time everyone gets through with her, said Whitney's accountant.
I'll put it to you this way. We are the biggest selling female group ever, and we are broke as broke can be.
We've seen this with so many artists, such as TLC and Toni Braxton. You work, but you're working for other people's profits. And those profits generally goes back to these artists' management and production company.
The first CD that's not really a soundtrack in like 8-9 years?
Yeah, 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah, they say it's my first recorded studio album in 8 years. And I always say, well, I did 3 soundtracks. I was singing. I don't know what they thought I was doing, but
yeah,
I was singing.
And you were in a studio, weren't you?
And I was in the studio.
There you go. So what are they complaining about?
I don't think they're complaining.
No.
I don't think anybody's unhappy over there at Arista.
Yeah.
With Whitney, it was no different. The issue was her company, Nippy Inc., headed by her parents and the employer of many of her family and friends.
Right. How is it, to all of a sudden to become the boss of your own family, of your own father and mother in a way? Does it work like that, or are you still, the little girl sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they treat me as if I'm the little girl. I don't think that I'll ever go away. I am the baby of the family, but a lot of times I'm the oldest.
My mama makes her own money. Why am I paying her bills? Said Whitney when she finally looked at her books. In A Song for You, Whitney's best friend Robin Crawford recounts the first time Whitney looked at her accounting records. She learned that she was paying people's salaries and also their bills. But not only was she paying their bills, she was also paying the bills of their families and friends. Oh, we have no money. Time to go on tour, said John Huston before sending Whitney on a 1997 tour. So why did Whitney's tours get more extensive throughout her career? Trust and believe, it was not because she wanted to sing more. It was because she did not know she was funding so many people's livelihoods.
Houston rock Chicago. Soul diva Whitney Houston kicked off her world tour at the Airy Crown Theater in Chi-Town with a 20-song set.
Like the Bodyguard tour, My Love Is Your Love was supposed to be a theater tour. But management greed turned it into a stadium tour with back-to-back-to-back dates. For example, in the middle of the touring run, in 7 days, she did 6 shows in 6 different cities, all in venues that set over 10,000 people. And remember, what did Tina Turner say about the physical demands of performing in a large stadium?
Quietly, the big venues, what people don't realize is such a sound, and the vocal cord is fighting against all of that electric sound and speakers. You can't sing.
I'm sitting, I'm playing drums behind her, right? And I'm sitting and I'm watching her, and I'm watching the muscles in her back and her everything just expand like that. She's like a doggone bodybuilder.
The My Love Is Your Love tour demonstrates just how physical singing is. The type of singing Whitney likes to do requires a strong body. This tour also demonstrates just how much weaker Whitney's body has gotten over the years. This is most noticeable in how her singing posture has declined. When singing, you want to stand as straight and as tall as possible to keep the body in alignment so that nothing gets in the way of producing the sound. If you watch her as a younger singer, the posture is perfect. If you watch her on the My Love tour, you'll often see her singing with her shoulders slumped forward. and she will straighten up or correct the posture if she has to go for a high note.
Oh, yes, and
because if you do that, the tendency is to use muscles in the neck and muscles that are not there for that. Those muscles are there for chewing. Absolutely. And and I'm sure that you have noticed as well, that one can see rather young singers that participate and the jaw shakes. That's because the emphasis is being put on the wrong muscles.
Also, looking at the neck, jaw, and facial muscles, you'll notice a lot of movement and tension.
I'm playing drums behind her, right? And I'm sitting and I'm watching her, and I'm watching the muscles in her back and her everything just expand like that. You know, she's like a doggone bodybuilder.
But because her body has gotten weaker as a result of drugs and overwork, when Whitney looks exhausted, it's because she is. She is using every muscle in her body to give her performance.
It also cost her near the end of the tours. I mean, you could see the toll it took on her voice to have to do those performances night after night.
Comparing this tour to the previous major tour, she is demonstrating a lesser vocal range for the night, but she is keeping the central vocal range in the same place, low G to F. In singing, there is a thing called Tessitura and vocal range. Vocal range is every note that you can sing. Tessitura is where you do most of your singing and where you sound your best. At any point in Whitney's career, a tessitura, or where she did her most singing, was low G to high F. And as her voice changes, she's bringing the entire vocal range she displays closer and closer inside of these boundaries. Whitney knew where she sounded her best, and she stayed there. The most significant change now is how comfortable she is within these boundaries. In the 80s, we would get more E's and F's. On the 1999 tour, she is a lot more conservative with how many of those she sings in a night. But we do get a lot of C's and D's. And she can still sing some of the older material in its original keys and arrangements.
there's a boy I know, he's the one I dream of.
The 4,000 fans were just as impressed, giving Whitney a 5-minute standing ovation.
I love Whitney! Whitney!
Phenomenal. Whitney was as gorgeous and beautiful as always.
My Love Is Your Love had the critics claiming old Whitney is back, referring to her being able to replicate moments of the years prior. With all of its praise, this tour will mark the end of her American touring career, and this can be linked to rumors concerning her drug use. Whitney's drug use can best be understood if put on a timeline. In her book, Sissy says Whitney would get in trouble as a little girl for stealing cigarettes out of her purse. So she has smoked cigarettes longer than she has done drugs. It's been reported that she started using cocaine at age 14. She's gracing magazine covers at 16. She's introduced to the public as a singer at 19. She has been on substances as long as she has been in the public eye.
Before The Bodyguard was very light. After The Bodyguard, it started getting heavy.
Whitney marks the Bodyguard tour as when her drug use increases. After the Bodyguard tour, there's a string of projects that Whitney does not want to do.
This has not been an easy time in Whitney Houston's personal life. Her publicist has confirmed that Whitney and husband Bobby Brown are having...
And in this same time period, she has miscarriages, and it's becoming public knowledge that she overdosed on the set of Excel. Our timeline shows that there is a dramatic increase in professional and personal stress that occurs after the Bodyguard. And this is why she is finally beginning to look out of it in public and on stage. Many fans ask, what happened to Whitney's voice after 1999?
When would you say a woman's vocal prime is?
40-ish up until 56, 57, something like that. It could be a little earlier, later, depending on how much abuse your throat is taken. Let's be real. How many performances you have when you're through.
You get about 15 to 25 years of high-level, high-quality singing. How many of those years you get depends upon how much you work and your lifestyle.
How you treated your voice in your 30s will show up in your 50s. You know, what the kind of lifestyle that you live will start to show.
And that clock starts ticking when the major career begins.
We don't talk about the transitions in women between 18 and 21, 24, 26, or 27 and 28 is a big year, because then you go through your next transition between that up into 32. And then 32, you have your another shift for the next couple of years to where the voice fills out and does whatever it's going to do, and then you land in your 40s. And then there's another vocal shift in your early 40s into your mid 40s. And, then you're getting into your prime, right? There's all of these steps.
Considering how a woman's voice and body develops, the Bodyguard voice could have lasted Whitney well into her 40s and into her early 50s. And then we would get the voice we hear during My Love Is Your Love. So what she sounds like during My Love Is Your Love, she would have sounded like this regardless. But her lifestyle and the amount of singing she did sped up the voice's aging process. If we compare Whitney's voice to a car, the average lifespan of a car is 15 years or 200,000 miles. You can get up to 25 years or 300,000 miles out of the car if you take great care of it. Many people also mention that a car will run perfectly before it gives out. That's the My Love Is Your Love tour. 1999 marks the 15th year of non-stop touring and singing. As much as fans and critics want to put all the blame on drugs, the simple answer is, by this point, she had used up all of her years of good singing.
Whitney Houston.
And we hear early signs of the voice entering a state of inconsistency in the performances that immediately follow the end of the tour. One thing we've noticed during these years is also her behavior becomes more erratic as her personal life becomes more erratic. By the end of the millennium, she was beginning to get fired from shows or simply just not show up.
By the end of the second rehearsal, either she didn't know the lyrics to one of the songs, or she started to sing the wrong song, or she felt discombobulated, as one report says, and it just seemed like she couldn't go on.
By the 2000, her appearances on the Michael Jackson television special.
It may be a bad shot, but this is real. I mean, the bones, that's real.
I can't believe that. But do you really know? Did you really know?
No, you know.
Thank you.
And the Diane Sawyer interview made it clear that things were not okay with Whitney. Her inability to manage her personal life now spilled over into her ability to record. And that is why the Just Whitney album was met with many stops and starts. The Just Whitney album is the record that puts Whitney's personal and professional troubles, past, present, and future, into context. It is the first record delivered under her new record-breaking $100 million deal with Arista Records. According to the LA Times, Whitney was set to release 8 albums under the new contract. However, she still owed Arista Records 5 albums under the contract she signed back in 1983. That means she already owed the label money for albums she did not produce when she signed the new record deal. If she's finally renegotiating her contract after 17 years, that means all of the record-breaking success from the first album through The Bodyguard was done under a shitty contract. Which makes this statement all the more clear.
What are they complaining about?
I don't think they're complaining.
No.
I don't think anybody's unhappy over there at Arista.
Yeah.
Whitney probably made no money off of any of those albums, which is why she stayed on tour.
The Queen of Soul could barely use the King's English when we talked about the embarrassing article in a Detroit paper that asks, why doesn't she pay her?
We can assume this also because outside of Mariah Carey and Celine Dion, all of the big divas were associated with Arista Records.
Are you broke?
No money problems whatsoever. That's Tony Braxton.
B-R-O-K-E broke?
Broke.
Like broke.
Like no money.
No money.
And all of them were having money troubles at the same time. The running theme of the Whitney biopic is in perpetuity.
Arista during the term of this agreement. In perpetuity throughout the universe?
Which means forever. Whitney would be owned by and in debt to Arista Records forever.
Congratulations. Welcome to Arista.
Musically, Just Whitney is an extension of My Love Is Your Love. Vocally, the voice is still in a similar place. But the most noticeable thing on the Just Whitney record and One Wish is you can now hear her breathing.
Don't think you're stressing me, 'cause your lies don't excite me. No, never thought.
This audible breathing in the microphone is also present during live performances from this time period.
Kick off my shoes and relax my feet. Hit the kitchen, grab a bite to eat. It's been one of those crazy weeks.
I don't know, it kind of just says how Bob and I feel about each other. You know what I mean? It was written by Gordon Chambers and Teddy Bishop. And it just describes how two people...
And even when she isn't singing, you can hear her breathing when she's speaking. And you couldn't hear that years prior. What you're hearing is the onset of early emphysema. When you exhale, the damaged lungs don't work correctly. So old air becomes trapped, leaving no room for fresh, oxygen-rich air to enter. Drug and cigarette usage can affect dental health. Around Just Whitney, it is said that Whitney had some dental work done. When singing or speaking, ideally you want to have the tongue in a flat and relaxed position. But if you watch Whitney's tongue from this point of her career forward, you'll often notice that her tongue appears in a tense or thickened position. But this goes to show you that any small change can affect your singing and sound production. When her cousin Dion gets a new set of teeth, she finds some difficulty pronouncing certain sounds. And on the other hand, and her other cousin, Leontine Price, delayed closing her gap because it would affect her ability to sing.
It's just ridiculous. I can't get no sleep. But my vibrato's fast, so I'll be trying to hold her back.
And something you'll also notice is that during the Just Whitney period, her vibrato is also a lot faster. Whitney's deep and even vibrato is wildly praised. As the years progressed, you'll notice that the vibrato transitioned from an even deep sound to a high-speed pulse, or what some people will call a goat. Vibrato speed is connected to your support and your breathing. The change in vibrato speed is a sign that the lungs and muscles she uses to support the breath are weaker, which connects to the early onset emphysema. The primary cause of emphysema is tobacco and marijuana smoking. Constant hoarseness and high risk of lung infections such as bronchitis and colds are also side effects of emphysema.
So when we arrived for the interview, we didn't know what we'd find. We were told she was suffering from laryngitis because she'd been traveling.
I'm not sick, Diane. I am not sick. Let's get that straight.
From this point forward, you'll notice that Whitney seems to be in a constant state of hoarseness.
And telling your business when it ain't their business. First of all, okay?
While the albums that followed My Love Is Your Love were not major sellers, critics recognized that Whitney could still deliver high-level, high-quality singing. And this would lead to the 2004 comeback.
You called it a beginning. Same thing as a comeback.
I never went anywhere.
Just to be with you forever.
To repair her public image, she goes to rehab, and she came out looking and sounding great.
And we've been missing her tremendously, and to see her coming back looking more beautiful, the way that we used to see her.
She take all of this improvement on a regional tour in Europe and Asia to positive reviews.
Without question, the night's sure bet, the moment of the evening, was Whitney Houston bringing down the house.
People out there want Whitney Houston. She's crossed into that national treasure.
That is such a blessing.
Area.
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
I felt that.
This 2004 tour showed that she had all that it took to get back to where she was as a vocalist.
Is Whitney Houston's marriage to Bobby Brown over?
But as was customary, when things were going well professionally, they weren't personally.
Like you said, you never met me, you don't know me, you ain't been in my house, you don't live with me, you don't sleep with me, you don't do shit with me, but talk about it.
Coupled with the loss of losing her father, she'd have more public missteps, such as her Wendy Williams interview and her appearance on the reality show Being Bobby Brown.
That's American.
Drug rumors and financial woes will become more evident, and to top it all off, her marriage was at the end of its rope. All of these things would send Whitney into an emotional tailspin, and she would lose her voice completely.
I understand you met Whitney Houston back in 2004 after being introduced by Stevie Wonder and began working with her. What kind of a shape was her voice in back then?
When I went to see her in Atlanta, her voice was in a horrible condition. I mean, her speaking voice and her singing voice were both hoarse. She had about one audible tone in her lower register. I was horrified.
When voice teacher Gary Katona finds her, she is what voice pedagogues describe as a non-functional voice. The medical term for this would be functional dysphonia, meaning the physical structure of the voice box is fine, but the voice quality is so poor that sounds cannot be produced. An example of this would be one of Whitney's rare public appearances at the BET Awards.
Okay. Awesome. And what do you think about being part of this celebration?
Hypnotized by his melodies and mesmerized by his sound. I know my brother Luther. I know you're listening.
Functional dysphonia is treatable with voice therapy.
Her voice began recovering very quickly from vocal exercising, so that told me a great deal. A lot of her injury was superficial, or else her voice would not have returned as quickly as it did.
Katona would rebuild Whitney's voice to the point where she could re-sing in public and complete her final record, I Look to You.
But what's so exciting to me is that Whitney has so much goodwill in the room. There are so many people, myself included, who are pulling for her, who know that this time she is ready.
I Look to You put Whitney back on top, and it looked like she finally had everything together after years of struggling. It can be implied that Whitney herself believed this as well. Her body language at the start of this era is reminiscent of the golden years. Big movements, big vocals, and even bigger applause.
As I lay me down, heaven hear me now. I feel lost without a cause.
At the time of its release, and still today, fans and critics are split on Whitney's voice during this period. The two common critiques are the raspiness and the deepening of the voice. But did the voice deepen as much as fans and critics like to imply?
Some good old-fashioned love. I got it, I got it.
Hearing the keys of songs consistent across her career, the entire voice has dropped about a tone, but it hasn't deepened much, if any, since 1997, as referenced by her still being able to sing all the music post-1997 in its original key. Similar to discussing the vocal shift between 1985 and 1995, from 1997 to present day, the difference is just quality and consistency of sound. In conversation with Whitney fans, her late career vocal coach, Gary Katona, mentions very important notes in her vocal range. Her best belt was a C. Her highest comfortable belt was a E, F, and she had access to a high C. Comparing songs across her career, the vocal arrangements have remained the same. The vocal line sits around low G,
Keeping us baby, in your way. As I lay me down, heaven hear me now.
The big note is right in the center of her voice between B flat and D flat. Highest parts of her song generally lie on high E or high F at the top of the style. Eternal Love, I Will Always Love You, and I Look to You have the same musical structure and arrangement. The major difference between late career and early career Whitney is quality and consistency of sound. On the final tour, Whitney had songs such as I Will Always Love You available in different keys, depending on the state of her voice that day. Operatic soprano Joan Sutherland would have arias available in multiple keys at the tail end of her career as well. Vocal inconsistency is a part of the aging process. However, the fact that Whitney was doing this at 45 and Joan Sutherland did not start doing this until her 60s should show how quickly Whitney's instrument aged due to overwork and her lifestyle choices.
Just life. It changes you. It changes your everything. How you treated your voice in your 30s will show up in your 50s.
Whitney Houston's opening concert in her long-awaited Australian tour fell flat last night.
A change in the quality of one's voice or body is inevitable in anyone's life. So why were people saying that Whitney could no longer sing? This goes back to what we have consistently seen about her career. The things people praise her for will be the same reasons they criticize her. We established very early on that Whitney's vocal technique is rooted in the tradition of old school gospel. Everything Whitney does and is known for is possible because she sings with an open throat throughout her entire reign. Keeping the throat open also means singing closer to where the vocal damage occurred. People have compared Whitney's drug uses to Chaka Khan and Natalie Cole, saying, well, why didn't their voices change? Like Houston, Khan and Cole will become non-functional voices.
Great time tonight, not only here, but also at Epcot Center, somewhere over the rainbow. What am I doing? This is not my song. Can we talk?
I miss him so much. With your music, I knew I was never alone. Like when you taught me, a house is not a home.
And both will have to relearn how to sing. What separates these women from Whitney is that Chaka Khan and Natalie Cole completely changed their singing technique, shifting to a more nasal placement and focusing their voices higher, which means singing further away from the vocal damage. Chaka Khan didn't fully develop that clear horn sound until after her vocal crisis. But if these women had attempted to sing with an open throat as they did earlier in their careers, it would not have sounded too different from Whitney. I mean, after all, have you heard Natalie Cole's album at the height of her drug addiction?
Tell me, how does it feel to sing again now after 8 years?
Very nice. I wish I was what I was 20 years ago, but nobody is what he was 20 years ago.
What aren't you?
After a 20-year absence, fans couldn't wait to see Whitney back in Australia, but after just a few songs,
Was about to lose my breath.
many couldn't wait to leave.
Disgraceful.
Disappointed.
Horrible.
Upset.
Definitely not worth $165.
The singing on this last tour is honestly not that bad. It's only disappointing if you are expecting her to sound how she did when she was 25.
They complained that the diva could no longer hit the high notes that once took her to the top of the charts.
However, if you listen with the understanding that this is a woman who has overcome drug addiction and spousal, familial, and professional abuse, you might appreciate these performances more.
We don't even hear mature singers what they sound like anymore because everyone's so busy chasing after the 25-year-old. We don't even get to know what a mature voice really should sound like, could sound like, or what that career shift is from one role to the next role to the next. You know, like, ain't nobody talking about that stuff, but we should be talking about that stuff.
Whitney isn't really doing anything different in these last years. But what the I Look to You era demonstrates is that fans prefer her voice based on their own personal sound quality preference. Fans of the 80s voice like a more youthful quality of sound. Bodyguard fans tend to favor a more dramatic sound and style of singing, while fans of her late 90s voice generally enjoy the quality of a mature woman. Fans and critics appreciated Whitney's entire musical output beyond her 80s classics, and if much of the praise about her singing and her voice did not revolve around the purity of her tone, fans and critics may have been more forgiving towards her raspy and aged voice. After all, legendary singers like Aretha Franklin and Mariah Carey also acquired raspy tones later in their careers, and their voices were still praised. Whitney Houston's I Look to You era was honestly an attempt to reinvent herself as a vocalist. She was trying new and different things, such as adding hip-hop into her ad-libs. But her fans and critics still expected her to be the same artist and vocalist that she was before.
More than half the audience walked out before the end of the show. Fans thought Houston talked too much. Music critics said the once pitch-perfect diva shouldn't have sung anything at all.
And that is the problem with the final tour. This is her average vocal range for an evening on the last tour. Comparing this to the 1988 tour, the voice still has about the same limitations. And as we've seen, the music arrangements have stayed the same. Quality and consistency issues aside, the voice is still the same voice, but the woman using the voice has changed.
Her voice began recovering very quickly from vocal exercising, so that told me a great deal. A lot of her injury was superficial, or else her voice would not have returned as quickly as it did.
Whitney's vocal coach said that much of her vocal damage was actually superficial or mental.
How do I say this? Also having the support system, the team of people who you have around you to help you, because it's not always physical. A lot of it is mental. That's why I said life stuff, learning how to navigate through the changes mentally when you just can't hit that note anymore. You just can't do those things.
As much as singing is physical, it is also mental. After The Bodyguard, there's a big switch in the music Whitney sings. Songs like Why Does It Hurt So Bad? It's Not Right, But It's Okay. Try It On My Own and I Look to You are all about a woman going through and trying to overcome.
My mother always told me, you can't sing anything that you don't feel or it will never come across.
I read that quote. That's a great quote.
Yeah.
I don't have to take off my clothes. I don't have to, shake my booty. I can still sing. Praise God.
And nobody complains about how she sings the 90s and 2000s music on this last tour.
She's going to have to make a mental change. She's going to want to be a mature woman singing reflective songs.
So the music she does sing well and identifies with, nobody wants to hear it.
I'm not invincible. I'm human. And as life goes through its changes, so will you.
I try to resist being last on your list.
If Whitney has to feel and believe what she's singing to sing it well, then maybe she doesn't sound her best because she no longer identifies with that 80s music. If anything has been obvious from Whitney's career, a great deal of personal and professional stress can be linked back to the tours. During the 88 tour, she begins working to fund everyone's livelihoods. On the 91 tour, she tears the vocal cord. The 94 tour starts the beginning of severe drug addiction. The 97 and 98 tours are money grabs. The 99 tour, she begins to unravel. So, what we see on the 2009 tour was bound to happen. What we should remember from these final years is that Whitney still had a voice. If she felt good, she could turn the clock back to 1999.
But the problem that she had developed and couldn't deal with was cigarette smoking. And that's what led to the very personal conversation I had with her the week that she died, where she finally, in my bungalow, said to me, I am committed to cutting out cigarettes.
And if she did indeed follow through on her plans of living a healthier lifestyle, how far back would that clock have gone? The only question that remains is, were we robbed of a true return of the voice? Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Until next time. To support this channel and continuing to provide quality and accessible music education programming, please consider donating to the links in the description or in the pinned comment. Thank you.